Good afternoon, Madam Presiding Officer. Good afternoon to the members sitting here, and good afternoon to those who are viewing on the various social media platforms, on the radio, and on television. First, Madam Presiding Officer, please allow me to extend greetings to the Spiritual Baptist community ahead of the official celebration, or the official liberation holiday on Monday. We know that it is a trying time for all of us, and particularly members of that community who look forward to being able to celebrate but can't because of COVID-19. Madam Presiding Officer, please allow me to indicate, unfortunately, that I am a tad, no, I'm a little bit more than a tad, disappointed that we are choosing to not stay in our safe spaces at home to come to debate a motion that in my mind and in the mind of many others is quite vague and that could have been used to do other more critical and timely debates. And let me give an example. Because, Madam Presiding Officer, we are working in a situation where we have an evolving crisis. Tobago could have been debating right now, since we had just decided to cancel Tobago Jazz Festival, to possibly use the funding from Jazz Festival to fund some of the things that we are doing or that we need to do. That is something that we could have specifically identified as we are debating. Let me raise a couple points, Madam Presiding Officer. First, and I would like to do this because I see that we continue to use words interchangeably, and we continue to misunderstand a couple concepts. So I'm going to take just a little bit of time to clear up a couple things. First, the virus is called the Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Corona 2 virus, short SARS-CoV-2. It is part of a larger body of coronaviruses, and this looks very closely like the SARS that we experienced several years ago that, unfortunately, or fortunately for us, was not as great as this is. The actual name of the disease, we've been calling it short, COVID-19 for short, Coronavirus Disease 2019. There's also another thing that we need to be clear about, and it's the term isolation versus quarantine. Yes, both words mean that we separate people, but we isolate people who are sick. So as long as we've identified that you are sick, that you have signs and symptoms, that you've been tested and you are a confirmed case, we isolate you. But if we understand, or if we think that you have been exposed but you are well, you are quarantined. And as we've been doing in Trinidad and Tobago, there are two ways to quarantine people who have been exposed but have not shown signs that they are sick. One is at the state-sponsored institutions, which we have in Trinidad and we also have in Tobago. But the other is in what we call self-quarantining, which is us basically saying to folks, you have been exposed, but I need you to stay home, to not mingle, to keep yourself away from even members of your families for at least 14 days, because that is the time it takes, on average, to start showing signs and symptoms after you have been exposed. Madam Presiding Officer, there are two other words that I would just like to clear up for the viewing public, and it relates to epidemic and pandemic. An epidemic is when you have an increase in the number of cases of anything. In a situation like us, from the time we had a single case in Trinidad and Tobago, that was an epidemic because we did not have cases before. And the pandemic means we have cases in almost in every region and almost every country of the world. So we are experiencing a pandemic. We can't start it, we can't, it is what it is, a pandemic. Madam Presiding Officer, one of the things that I think we need to do in Tobago is, instead of really just piggybacking on what is done in Trinidad, we need to take this opportunity to critically figure out for ourselves here whether we can implement a comprehensive response to COVID-19. And that comprehensive response, Madam Presiding Officer, includes doing a lot of the public education and so forth. It also includes testing and the associated quarantining if we are not testing yet, or contact tracing after we have determined that you have a case. It also includes treatment. It also includes psychosocial support for all of us. And it includes the economic recovery that would be necessary to combat what this disease has done. I will focus on three of those: testing, treatment, and psychosocial support. Madam Presiding Officer, the testing of individuals who we suspect to have COVID-19, the protocols as it relates to testing continue to change. It is a moving target as we learn more about what's happening. We change who gets tested, when they get tested, and so forth. We have an opportunity now, Madam Presiding Officer, though, because Tobago is still several weeks behind the rest of the world, and Trinidad and Tobago is still several weeks behind many other countries as it relates to the evolution of this pandemic. We have an opportunity now to use this time, Madam Presiding Officer, to use the lag time that we have, to use the 2 or 3 weeks ahead of what happens everywhere else to ensure that we are properly prepared. Madam Presiding Officer, there are studies coming out of China that suggest that up to 60% of the people who have COVID-19 or who have been infected with SARS-CoV-2 are asymptomatic, meaning they do not show the regular signs and symptoms, or have very mild signs and symptoms. In some of these studies, we see where 18%, 31%, if you look at what is happening and what happened on the Diamond Princess cruise, those people who they tested, up to 31% of those people did not have any signs and symptoms at all, but when they tested them, they were positive for SARS-CoV-2, which means that there are a large proportion of people in the world who have the virus inside of them, who is replicating the virus inside of them, who can then transmit the virus to other people who are not showing signs and symptoms. In some instances, in Iceland, for example, where they have been doing mass testing. In Iceland, they have not been following the WHO and those recommendations in terms of who to test. In Iceland, they have been mass testing, and they've been doing surveillance testing in essence. What they have been picking up is that about 50% of the people who were tested positive did not have signs and symptoms. Now, that is critical, and we need to pay very special attention to that fact now that we are a couple weeks ahead of the rest of the world. Madam Presiding Officer, the New England Journal of Medicine reported that there have been several studies where they've taken the swabs of the throats of these people who do not have the signs and symptoms, and they recognize that they have very high viral load still. So even though they are not coughing or they are not sneezing or they are not doing any of those things, they still have very high viral loads, which means they can then transmit it. And they are recognizing from doing very, very careful contact tracing, Madam Presiding Officer, that those are some of the people who actually have been infecting a large proportion of those who get infected, because when they do the contact tracing, some of these people who have gotten infected, we can't figure out where they got the infection from because they did not come into contact with people who were confirmed. Because of that, Madam Presiding Officer, I would strongly recommend here in Tobago that we, in the first instance, do testing of everyone who has flu-like symptoms. And I am clear when I said flu-like symptoms and not necessarily COVID-19 symptoms, because those who have the flu-like symptoms, some of them are very, very mild, and those are the ones who the rest of the world has been showing they've been missing because they did not meet the standard protocol for being tested. I would recommend, Madam Presiding Officer, that after doing that first step of testing folks with flu-like symptoms, that we go out and do surveillance testing. Tobago, Madam Presiding Officer, is 60,000 people. We have the benefit of having a pretty small population here. And because we have a very small population, we have an opportunity to arrest this before it gets out of hand. Madam Presiding Officer, if we use a very conservative testing regimen where we do surveillance testing of 1 in every 200 people, that is only, what, 300? 350 tests. In the grander scheme of things, 300 tests in Tobago to pick up and ensure that we are infected or not infected is not a tall order. And it is worth taking time, effort, and resources to put it into our system to ensure that we can do something like that. Because the WHO, yesterday I think, the Director General basically warned countries that are being too relaxed, that are not learning from the examples of the countries that are way, way, way ahead. We have an opportunity, Madam Presiding Officer, to heed that warning. How would we do that, Madam Presiding Officer? I heard, I think, I can't remember the date of that press briefing, because the government has been doing briefings every day. I can't remember what day this was particularly announced. Is that even though we have CAFA is our only authorized testing site in Trinidad and Tobago and for most of the Caribbean, I heard the Minister for Health boasting about us getting additional testing machines, additional lab equipment, and that they were going to roll out and certify or accredit testing to happen at Eric Williams Medical Complex and at the Trinidad Public Health Lab. And when I was counting the number of additional machines that he was talking about and the number of additional sites that he was talking about, we have an opportunity here in Tobago, Madam Presiding Officer, for one of those extra machines, because I think he spoke about three additional sets coming in, to having one of those in Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, I keep hearing people saying that we don't have people who know how to do the test. Before this happened, we did not have people who knew how to do the test. That is why PAHO, that is why WHO, that is why CARFA, that is why all of those agencies have been providing technical assistance to Trinidad and Tobago to bring our lab techs up to point where they can do it. As a matter of fact, Madam Presiding Officer, I think, if I am not mistaken, I heard the Minister for Health also state that somebody else was coming in from Miami to do the training with these additional machines that were coming in, and he was going to ask the Minister for National Security to allow this foreigner to come in, because he was going to come in using a private jet, and he was so happy, and all of that was going to happen. So the same way he can come in and come to Trinidad, Madam Presiding Officer, he can come in and come to Tobago. We have a host of lab technicians, many currently working, many who have graduated and are not yet working. So if the issue is we need more people to take up the load, there are people who have the basic training, who have level 1 and level 2 lab tech training in Tobago, who just need to be additionally trained in this specific situation. We can do that, Madam Presiding Officer. Treatment is the other thing I want to chat about. We currently have, Madam Presiding Officer, a plan that says if you need treatment, meaning if you have COVID-19 and you are one of the 20% or so who need to be hospitalized, that you will then be taken to Trinidad. I understand that we are going via Coast Guard. That is plan A, Madam Presiding Officer. We are in an opportunity, we are in a position, Madam Presiding Officer, to ensure that we start plan B, plan C, and plan D are rolling, because the way this thing evolves, it evolves so quickly that we may need to look at a plan B. What if, Madam Presiding Officer, I got up this morning, or I think after I had gotten dressed, I saw that the entire Aruca police station had to be shut down because a police officer was out of the country, came back in, did not self-quarantine for the 14 days, went to work, and he is now exhibiting flu-like symptoms. The entire police station had to shut down because of that. What if, Madam Presiding Officer, and this is one of those things that I am praying does not happen, but the reality is it is happening everywhere else. And as much as we believe in this country that God is a Trinity, what we are seeing is that that may not necessarily be true. What if we have a situation, Madam Presiding Officer, where we have a case that is run away? And I refuse to even speak about the public figure who announced recently that he had COVID-19 and what that probably means to a bank, to a casino, to all of these places that he visited. We have a real possibility, Madam Presiding Officer, of suddenly having so many cases in Trinidad that need hospitalization, that the beds at Couva, Cora, Arima, and even Napa could be filled. And we, Madam Presiding Officer, here in Tobago, need to determine right now what our plan B will be if and when that happens. We can't start thinking about it when it happens. By then, Madam Presiding Officer, it will be too late. Madam Presiding Officer, what we are recommending is to possibly designate one of the health centers that are underutilized because we have 20-something health facilities, 60,000 people, 116 square miles. On any average day, most of our health centers are not fully used. They are not halfway used. They are not quarter way used. We could think through which of these may be the best to designate as a COVID-19 treatment center. The same way in Trinidad, they could identify that they can go into Napa to have Napa be a COVID-19 treatment center. We could identify a space in Tobago. One of these health centers may be Mariah. Mariah is coming on stream soon, I understand. Maybe we...
10 minutes more.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Maybe we can designate Mariah, speed up the last couple, whatever work is happening now, because I understand it's coming on stream from next month. It's being handed over next month. Speed that up so that we can have a designated space in Tobago for treatment, Madam Presiding Officer. Because what is necessary is we need to be able to have ventilator services for patients. That is what is necessary, Madam Presiding Officer. I understand, and please correct me if I am wrong, that we do have 6 or so ventilators in Tobago. I understand that 1 is assigned to A&E, 1 to the theater, 2 somewhere else in the wards, and 2 that are on reserve, which is standard protocol. Just in case 1 goes down with a patient, we have another 1 to pull and use immediately. Madam Presiding Officer, I also heard on the 23rd of March, the Minister of Health boasting about having some 15 ventilators coming from somewhere, 10 coming from somewhere else, another 50 coming from somewhere else. That is 75 right there coming into Trinidad. And then he also spoke about another 50 to 100 that are being donated from somewhere else. These are over 100 ventilators that are coming into Trinidad and Tobago. And I am suggesting that as a plan B, we negotiate to have at least 10 of those, Madam Presiding Officer, come to Tobago so that we can treat with our patients here. As a matter of fact, we need a portable one right now, because if, heaven forbids, a patient that is going from Tobago to Trinidad via Coast Guard needs ventilator servicing while on the way, I am not sure that we have a portable one to go with. If we do, thank God. If not, we need to fix that right now. Madam Presiding Officer, I have also heard several people talk about the fact that we have enough PPEs. We have enough PPEs. And in the same breath that we talk about having enough PPEs, I have health professionals, I have first responders messaging me and telling me they don't have PPEs. Now, what may be happening may be that they are uncomfortable with what is required of them now, and they need to feel more comfortable with the processes so that they can do their work. Now, that leads me to the third point, which is the psychosocial support that we need of everyone on the island, starting with our health professionals. If you live on this island, you know that we have come out of a situation where our health professionals have been extremely demotivated. That is a fact. So we know that we have to do all that we can to also then push them into this situation where they are seeing that their counterparts in the US, when they get sick, they get COVID-19 severest compared to other people. Studies are showing that. So, Madam Presiding Officer, maybe we need to spend a little more time ensuring that these healthcare workers are communicated with, because it may really just be a matter of communication. The PPEs are probably coming, but they don't know. So it's a matter of communication maybe. We also need to ensure that those people, those healthcare workers that we care for and we love so much, really have other mental health services. Debriefing is absolutely necessary because this is going to, I know that some of them have already gotten very tired. Just a regular case load makes you tired. And going into this, we need to prepare for how they will get tired, how we will prop them up mentally to provide this service. Madam Presiding Officer, before I take my seat, I would also like to ensure that we do all that we can, particularly since the Secretary with responsibility for health, family development, and wellness and family development also is responsible for social support, that we have very clear social support, clear counseling opportunities for members of the public. People are afraid. People are scared. This is something that we have never experienced before, and we need to have that kind of support. We also, very quickly, Madam Presiding Officer, need to ensure that we are able to respond, because if we are telling people to do social distancing and stay home, we need to be prepared for the domestic violence issues that may come up as a result of that. Madam Presiding Officer, as I said, we have an opportunity now, because we are several weeks ahead of this, to do our plan B, C, and D, and take the time to implement our plan B, C, and D right now. Because if we wait until we need plan B, C, and D to start thinking and start implementing it, we will be too late. I would end by encouraging all of us to keep washing our hands, social distancing. If you are sick, stay home and follow the guidelines. Those who are self-quarantining, please, for the love of all that is holy, follow the guidelines of self-quarantining, because this is how we would be able to be ahead of COVID-19. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Deputy Chief Secretary and Secretary for Finance and Economy.